Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I haven't been down at the mill for a while, so I thought I'd come down. The weather looked good and then I arrived and it started spitting. Fingers crossed it doesn't affect it too much. But anyway, unfortunately I'm here today to say goodbye to another camera. And that camera is my Canon R8, which I've had now for about 5 months. And I've amassed about 7,000 shots in that time. Admittedly, probably about 90–95% of those shots are shooting my dog in a sequence, but still I feel like I've taken enough shots to realise that this camera is not for me. In my effort to try and speed up my videos, like my last video I did on gear, the Ricoh GR, I had to split it into 2 videos, so I'm aiming for speed this time around and hopefully imparting the key things that I want to get across in this video. Let's get the 3 big things out of the way as to why I'm returning the Canon. I say returning, I'm going to have to sell it, but why I'm selling the Canon R8. So number 1 is subjects that move. For my case, so for my dog running towards me, I find that she's most expressive when she's closer to the camera, so not like encroaching on the minimum focus distance of a lens, like I use the 85mm f1.8 EF lens for a lot of my running dog photography. And so the subject, my dog, hasn't come towards me too close, and I just find that the camera does struggle. Don't get me wrong, it does a much better job than the Sony A9 I had. It definitely tracks for longer, but I just find as soon as it starts to get too close, the tracking becomes erratic and the hit rate really does suffer in those decisive moments where my dog, I would say, is most expressive. All the shots in the distance are fine, but when, like I said, the dog comes close, I do find that the hit rate is not where I expected it to be. So my second big problem I have with this camera is for subjects that don't move. And I don't tend to have a problem with other cameras that don't have in-body stabilization. Like I've got an XE1 that hasn't got stabilization, the Canon 5D, which doesn't have any stabilization, and I've got a few film cameras which obviously don't have any stabilization either. But yet for some reason I just can't get consistently good one shot focus, or even when I use servo autofocus on static subjects, I just find it's so hit and miss for me when using the Canon R8. And I've got really no idea why that is. Like, it can handle some really challenging conditions. Like I took this shot a few weeks ago and it was like f/16 challenging light and the camera absolutely nailed it. Yeah, I'll go out just for like a photo walk, take some pictures of some fairly innocuous static subjects, have a high shutter speed, like 1/300, 1/400th of a second, and the image just turn out of focus or unsharp. And I just can't for the life of me work out why that is. And that's on all the lenses that I've got for it. And even though this is the 17-35 Tamron, it hasn't got any lens stabilization, but I did buy the 24-70 f4 Canon EF lens, and that does have stabilization, and I don't find that really makes much difference either. I think the best lens I did find had stabilization was the 70-300 that I did borrow off a friend for a while, and that was the L variant, and I did find that the stabilization in that did work really well. But for the other lenses that I've got, I just seem to struggle with getting consistent one-shot static scenes in focus, and as such I've lost a little bit of confidence in taking this camera out and actually capturing images that I'm happy with. The third big thing why I've decided the Canon R8 isn't for me, and that's due to the fact that the Canon system, certainly for full frame lenses, is very limited to just Canon only lenses, certainly for autofocus. And if you want to get decent lenses for the system, like I was looking at the 70-200 f4 and also the 24 to 105 f4, and they are easily well over £1,000, even used. You don't seem to get much discount here in the UK at the moment for buying used gear. Yeah, you're very limited in the Canon system to buy the lenses that might give you better results than just relying on like ones which have been adapted via like a control ring adapter here. And saying that, I do find that like the Tamron 17-35, for instance, works really well with video, and a lot of my recent vlogs have been with this actual combination, and I found that that does a really good job on the tripod. I haven't admittedly tried it handheld because obviously I would be relying on the digital stabilization only of the Canon R8, but I do think it would probably be workable if I could have got the other aspects around moving subjects and static subjects, getting those results that I was hoping for really with the Canon R8. Just going back to the moving autofocus at the moment, it does do a very good job with slow moving things like humans, and I'm sure it'll do well with birds, but whether it's just my dog and the fact that she's small and dark, I really don't find that it does a particularly good job. Like I said, it does better than the Sony A9, but when I can see it tracking my dog, I don't see the eye autofocus on the actual tracking box on the Canon R8. I see like a big square that it's trying to track the head, but invariably, especially when the dog comes closer to me, that jumps to the back of the body, and it doesn't seem to matter what aperture I set it, whether it's 1.8 or 5.6, I still get the same results. I've also tried obviously changing the autofocus settings on here, the tracking sensitivity, all the different like autofocus cases, and then tweaking them to try and make it stickier, all to no avail really. It's really frustrating because I really thought the Canon, initially I was getting some really good results, but as time's gone on and I've tried to refine my approach, I don't seem to be able to improve the results that I've been getting, which have been okay, don't get me wrong, just probably not where I was hoping them to be, because I think I've got similar results in the past with my old EM1 Mark II camera and even the Fujifilm X-H1 when I had it. Frustrating. One other thing I want to mention about the autofocus system as well is I do like the feature, if you've got multiple subjects in the scene, you can like assign to a button to basically initiate the ability to select which subject you want to be the focus in your composition, and that has worked a little bit with differentiating between, say, like my wife and my dog, but only really when they're close. If they move back to a position where I'm about to start like a running dog sequence, the camera has a really hard time differentiating between a human, my wife, and the dog. Even though the camera is set to animals, for sometimes, or most times, it'll just lock on the human. And even if I change the point of the autofocus to just target my dog with the whole area servo autofocus off, it will still go up to the human. And I just find that really frustrating, because you would think by selecting animal autofocus it wouldn't jump to a human unless you have it on human or all autofocus. It's just got to the point where I've just had it really with this camera. I've just tried everything under the sun to get it working better, but I just can't seem to crack what I need to do to get it to match my admittedly high expectations. One other negative about the Canon R8 is I'm not a massive fan of the colours. I think what I tend to struggle with is its auto white balance, in that it comes across very sickly sweet, almost a little bit too warm, and I'm always having to dial it back. But I do find that I have to tweak virtually every shot that I take with the Canon R8. But then admittedly, one positive is that I do find the raw files quite malleable, in that there's a lot of information that you can recover from the raw files from the Canon R8, and it does seem to have a really good dynamic range that captures all the information, and then you just need to then bring that out when you're editing the image in post. Right, so don't get me wrong, this is a positive as well, the fact that the Canon R8 is quite a small, light body, well, until you put some EF lenses on, but I do find the positioning of the buttons are a little bit awkward. Like, you can customize quite a lot on the Canon R8, as I have done, but I've had to disable some of them because I just kept on knocking them. Like, certainly the ones up here around the thumb and down on the dials here as well. I just found that it would like move my autofocus point too far, and yeah, so I don't feel that I can completely maximize on the amount of buttons, but it is nice to have like a quick button, the Q button in there, and then also the multifunction button on the top, which I do find to be really, really good. I just question some of the placement or the design of the camera, which does, for me, cause me to hit these buttons when I don't want to. This is probably linked to the struggles I have with getting static images sharp, in that you can tweak obviously the minimum shutter speed, auto ISO minimum shutter, and I do that, and it still doesn't really help. So the implementation doesn't seem to be as good as, say, on like my Fujifilm X-E1, where I just set the shutter speed to like a minimum, and I can get all my shots in focus and sharp. I just seem to really struggle with the Canon R8, and I don't really know why. The last negative I want to say as well is that when you're reviewing images on the back of the camera, and if you've certainly taken them in the vertical position, when you're then viewing them on the back and you want to see the full picture, they don't auto-rotate. You have to go in manually to rotate them. How does that sound now? I've moved away from the raging water, so I could probably hear myself think a little bit more. Anyway, so what did I like about the Canon R8? I've already mentioned the size and the weight, so I won't dwell on that too much more. Even though I might end up returning to my 4/3 in the long run, I definitely still want a camera where I can achieve that full frame look that I like in my images. I've already mentioned video. I do find the video on this to be very good. Like, I'm using the Osmo Pocket now just so I can have like the Canon R8 in shot, but it's certainly easier to vlog on a camera with a fully articulated screen than it is on the tiny Osmo Pocket. For the start of this video, I did have my phone, an old phone attached to it so I could see myself, but the phone's died, so I'm just limited now to the poster size screen on the Osmo. So other things that I will miss is the size of the RAW files. Like the compressed RAW files on this 24 meg sensor camera were like 16, 17 meg in size. And I know you do potentially lose some information with the compressed RAWs, but I've never really found that to be the case. It sounds a little bit weedy, I find, but yeah, most of my shooting is with the electronic shutter though on the Canon R8, and I haven't really noticed any rolling shutter effects in my images, whereas I know when I had the XH1 that did suffer particularly badly from rolling shutter. And I briefly talked about it earlier, that I like the ability when your subjects are closer to use the function to select which subject or which eye you want in focus. But I know the Canon R8 has got an extra special feature where you can use the LCD screen to tap to change the subject. But I was really disappointed to find out that that only works when you're looking through the EVF. So you would have like the screen out to one side, use your EVF, and you can tap to move that functionality. It's a real shame that you couldn't use that on the LCD when you're not looking through the EVF, because a lot of my shots I'm in this orientation with the camera, and it would have been good to be able to just tap to change between like my wife and my dog, but it just hasn't really worked out for me like that. So it's definitely got a good LCD screen. I've got no complaints with that, and the EVF is supposed to be lower quality than the actual R6 Mark II EVF, but I've never really found that it's held me back with shooting. More clarity is always very good, but I think it's much better if it's like lag free, that what you'll see, and I haven't really had any problems whatsoever with the EVF on the R8. So it does offer the ability to do a pre-burst, so that where you can hold the shutter down halfway, and then when you fully depress it, it will save some of the images in a file. But the problem on the R8 is it puts it all into one file, so you have to go in, review the sequence and extract the files manually in camera or using Canon's like DPP software on a computer. And whilst I actually quite liked the ability to just go through the sequence, oh yeah, I like that one, pull that one out, go through it, oh yeah, I like that composition, pull that one out. But it would have been really better if you could zoom in on the shots to ensure that you achieve critical focus where you needed it, and then extract that file. But you have to extract it, then zoom in to see whether you did achieve focus where you wanted it. Just quickly, battery size, yes, it's a small battery, and I have picked up a spare one, but I generally find it does me well for a day's shooting, more than a day's shooting, and it certainly does fine as well for when I'm shooting videos. So yes, it's a small battery, but yeah, I haven't really found any issues with that. It's only got one single SD card slot as well, but again, I'm not really a professional shooting weddings every day, so I don't feel that I need that backup function. One other thing that was a little bit annoying as well is, like on the Sony A9, I did actually use the crop mode a little bit. So when you're shooting like landscapes with a 100mm lens, you could punch in the crop mode and get like 150mm. This only helped with composition, and the file sizes in the Sony A9 were about 12, 13 megs, so not brilliant considering the full sensor is 24 meg, but still probably quite usable. Whereas the crop mode on the R8, it crops it down to like 8 meg, and I do find that it's very, you can't really do a lot with that. You would have to absolutely nail the composition in that I find to come away with a reasonable, workable shot. So yeah, so even though I didn't think it would bother me, and I do feel like my next camera, I definitely want it to have IBIS. You know, whether that was the reason why I wasn't getting shots with this combination. But then, like I said, I've got other cameras without IBIS and without lens stabilization. So I just don't know why I struggled with this combination so much. The only time I didn't really find that I struggled is when I use it on a tripod, but then I can practically do that with any camera, and I need one still, I feel, for action. And I say action, it'd just be nice to be able to track my dog running towards me and capture more close-up shots. And when I did ask for lens recommendations, people always talked about the 70-200 f2.8, and I'm sorry, but on the Canon EF system, that lens weighs about 1.6 kilograms plus the adapter 1.7 kilograms. That for me is just far too heavy. I tried the 70-300L lens and 1.2 kilograms with the adapter, and that was probably my limit. So there was no chance I was getting the EF lens to do that job. And then people were saying, oh yeah, get the RF lens, but the RF 70-200, yes, it weighs a lot less and it's a native lens, but it's just crazy money for me. Like, I'm only doing this as a hobby. I'm not prepared to spend like over £2,000 just for a lens for my hobby. And yeah, this is where I think Canon is missing a trick, you know, not opening up the system to allow more good quality but more budget options onto the table. So harking back to one of the main reasons why I'm moving away from Canon mirrorless is just purely because they just need to open that mount up to other third parties, like pretty much all other camera manufacturers have now done. One other indifferent thing as well, before I move on to what next, is that getting a full frame camera, I was really looking forward to lower noise in my shots. But when you're shooting in low light anyway, and in conditions like woodlands, I do find that the Canon files do go up in ISO quite a bit in order to capture the action. And I do find that noise is still just as visible as on my Micro Four Thirds files. Probably the only difference is it's probably a little bit easier to get rid of it whilst retaining more detail in the image. But I definitely think that now you've got like Lightroom's AI noise reduction, that does allow you to consider other options other than full frame for some aspects of photography, certainly wildlife and sports photography, I feel. And it's where I'm leading on to next, really, in terms of where do I go from here. And I think really with what I'm prepared to spend, I'm probably looking at going back to, even though I don't really want to, but I do think that probably the OM1 and probably the OM1 Mark II is probably the camera that I'm probably going to opt for those aspects of the photography that I do in terms of action. And another aspect I find that Micro Four Thirds is better in is macro. Certainly you get a lot more depth of field. I know you can do focus bracketing with other cameras, but I feel like if you've got more depth of field to start with single shots, then you're well on your way to doing better. And there are definitely some interesting lenses in Micro Four Thirds when it comes to macro photography. So yes, I think I'm definitely going to end up with more than one system. So the Olympus or the OM system camera for action, and then I'll stick with my Canon 5D for now to see whether I need another full frame camera to give me that full frame look when I crave that in my photography. I did briefly consider other systems as well, like I did when I got rid of the Sony A9, and I ended up thinking about trying the Canon system. But I think that even though I have an itch with Fujifilm in wanting to try a better Fujifilm camera, I just feel like they're going off on a tangent at the moment with their autofocus. Certainly I just don't feel like it's there compared to other systems. And I'm not really convinced that I need a 40 meg sensor either as well. It's I do find like 24, 26 is a nice sweet spot for me. I think as well, even though I do like the medium format look when I see medium format images, I don't think I want to spend that much money just getting a GFX camera and a lens just for that very small set of my photography. I think I'm quite happy with a full frame camera and a fast aperture lens to achieve that that 3D like pop that you see sometimes in images. So yeah, so I'm hoping the OM1 Mark II, and the reason why I say the Mark II is, even though I was thinking about just picking up an OM1, I think the increased buffer will help with my like running shots. The fact that you can, on the OM1, you can fill the 50 frames per second buffer in 2.5 seconds. I just think that's quite a short amount of time when you're tracking a dog running towards you. So I think the increased buffer in the OM1 Mark II is definitely a big draw for me. So yeah, so before the heavens open and it starts to rain more, I think I will bring this video to a close. And thank you all for hanging on in there. I certainly didn't, when I bought the Canon R8, think I would be here in a similar position to I was when I was selling the Sony A9. I really thought that that camera was going to be my exit camera. I know that term is being used at the moment, but I'm just a little bit disappointed that it hasn't really delivered for me. Yeah, I briefly looked at Nikon, you know, but I think I would have to get a Nikon Z8 to get the autofocus performance that I need. And again, I'm just not willing to spend like $3,000 on a camera that, yeah, I just feel like the 1,000 that I spent on the R8 and the 1,300 I spent on the Sony A9, that's more about my limit. And the good thing with going back to Micro Four Thirds and back to Olympus is I've already got some great lenses for that system. So the entry value going back to Olympus is not that high, because technically I never left. I've just been trying some other things which haven't really delivered. So yeah, so that's me rabbiting on enough. As always, thanks for watching. I'll leave you with a montage of my favorite shots I've been able to capture with the Canon R8 the past 5 months. So thanks for watching. Bye for now.